I watched my daughter and son-in-law lock the door to my workshop and heard the deadbolt slide into place. Through the small window, I could see them walking back to the main house, laughing. What they didn't know was that this workshop held a secret I'd been protecting for 38 years, a secret that would change everything they thought they knew about our family and this land. My name is Thomas Brennan, and at 67 years old, I never imagined I'd be locked in my own workshop by my own daughter. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got here. My wife Catherine and I had spent 42 years building our life on this property in rural Ontario. The main house was a beautiful two-story craftsman we'd restored ourselves in the early 80s, but it was the workshop behind it that held the real value, though nobody knew it except me and one other person who'd been dead for nearly 4 decades. Catherine suffered a severe stroke 3 months ago. At 65, she'd always been so active, so vibrant. Now she needed assistance with basic tasks, and I'd become her full-time caregiver. We'd moved her bed downstairs to what used to be the library so she wouldn't have to navigate stairs. I spent my days helping her with physical therapy exercises, preparing meals she could manage, and reading to her in the evenings. Our daughter Miranda was 40 years old, married to a man named Greg Holloway for the past 12 years. They lived about an hour away in Ottawa, where Greg worked as some sort of financial consultant. Miranda had been a sweet child, always drawing pictures and leaving them on our fridge, always wanting to help her mother bake cookies. But somewhere along the way, especially after she married Greg, something changed. The visits became less frequent, the phone calls shorter, and when she did visit, I could see her eyes calculating, assessing what we had and what it might be worth. It was a cold November afternoon when they showed up unannounced. I was in the kitchen preparing Catherine's lunch, soft scrambled eggs and toast, cut into small pieces she could manage, when I heard the car pull up. "Dad, we need to talk," Miranda said as she walked through the door without knocking. Greg followed behind her, carrying a leather briefcase that seemed oddly formal for a family visit. "Of course, sweetheart. Let me just finish getting your mother's lunch ready." "This can't wait," Greg interrupted. His voice had that clipped, businesslike tone I'd come to dislike over the years. "We've been talking, and it's clear you two can't manage this property anymore." I felt my jaw tighten, but I kept my voice calm. "We're managing just fine." "Dad, Mom can barely walk," Miranda said, though her tone held more frustration than concern. "You're not getting any younger either. This house is too much. The property is too much. We have help coming in 3 times a week, which is costing you a fortune," Greg cut in again. "We've done the math. Between Catherine's medical bills, the in-home care, and maintaining this property, you're hemorrhaging money. The smartest thing would be to sell this place, move you both into a nice retirement facility, and put the proceeds into a trust." I set down the spatula carefully. "We're not selling our home." "Be reasonable," Miranda said, and I saw a flash of something in her eyes I didn't like. "What are you two going to do with 5 acres and 2 buildings? You can't take care of it. And when you're gone, we need to think practically about the estate." So there it was. Not concern for her mother's well-being, not worry about my health, just the cold calculation of inheritance. "This property has been our life for over 40 years, I said quietly. "Your mother and I aren't going anywhere." Greg opened his briefcase and pulled out some documents. "We've already consulted with an elder care attorney. Given Catherine's condition, we have grounds to petition for guardianship. We're trying to do this the easy way, Thomas. Work with us here." I felt anger rising in my chest, but years of dealing with difficult people in my previous career as a civil engineer had taught me to stay composed. "I think you two should leave now." "Dad, don't be stubborn," Miranda pleaded, but there was steel underneath her words. "We're doing this for your own good. Leave, now." They exchanged a look, and Greg packed up his papers. "We'll be back," he said, "and next time we won't be asking." After they left, I sat with Catherine, holding her hand. She couldn't speak much since the stroke, but her eyes told me she'd heard everything, and she was scared. "Don't worry," I whispered to her. "They don't know everything. They don't know about the workshop." 3 weeks later, they returned. This time they weren't alone. They'd brought a man they introduced as David Pritchard, supposedly a social worker specializing in elder care assessments. I didn't trust him from the moment he walked through our door. "Mr. Brennan, I'm here just to evaluate the living situation and make sure all necessary care is being provided. Pritchard said with a professional smile that didn't reach his eyes. I later learned that Greg had paid him privately to write whatever report they needed. But in that moment, I played along, showing him around the house, demonstrating how we'd adapted everything for Catherine's needs. "And what's that building out back?" he asked, pointing through the window at my workshop. "My workshop? I used to do woodworking there." "Used to? I don't have much time for it anymore. Caring for my wife. Mind if I take a look?" "Yes. Actually, I do mind. The assessment is for the house, where we live, not my personal workspace." He made a note on his clipboard, and I knew that would be spun negatively in whatever report he filed. They left after an hour, and I had a sinking feeling things were about to escalate. I was right. 2 days later, Miranda and Greg showed up early in the morning. I was still in my pajamas, having just gotten Catherine settled after her morning routine. "We need to talk about the workshop, Dad," Miranda said as she pushed past me into the house. "I told you before. We had it appraised," Greg announced, pulling out his phone to show me photos. "Do you know what that building is worth? The land underneath it? You're sitting on almost $750,000 in property value, and you're letting it rot. How dare you have my property appraised without permission?" "We're your family," Miranda said. "We have a right to know what we're dealing with." "What you're dealing with," I felt my voice rising. "This is my home, my property, mine and your mother's, not yours." "Not for long," Greg said coldly. "We've filed the guardianship petition. The hearing is in 3 weeks. Judge will see that Catherine can't make decisions, and you're not capable of managing the estate. And when we have guardianship, the first thing we're doing is selling this place and that workshop. Get out of my house. You can't keep us from what's rightfully. Get out." They left, but Miranda turned at the door. "You're being selfish, Dad. You're thinking about yourself instead of what's best for everyone." After they drove away, I sat on the porch for a long time, thinking. Then I went to the workshop. The building looked ordinary from outside, just a large shed. Really, about 30 by 40 feet, with a peaked roof and small windows placed high up. I unlocked the door and stepped inside, breathing in the familiar smell of sawdust and machine oil. The workshop was filled with my woodworking equipment: table saw, lathe, bandsaw, drill press, lumber stacked against the walls. Half-finished projects on the workbench. But that wasn't what made this place valuable. I walked to the back corner, where I kept my lumber storage, behind a stack of 2x4s. Nearly invisible, unless you knew where to look, was a small door built into the wall. I moved the lumber aside and opened it. The hidden room was about 12 by 12 feet, and it was filled with paintings. Not just any paintings. These were the lost works of Marcus Brennan, my uncle, who died in a house fire in 1987. Uncle Marcus had been a talented but troubled artist, struggling with alcoholism and depression most of his adult life. The art world had mostly ignored him while he was alive, but after his death, his style had been discovered by collectors. The few paintings that survived the fire had sold for enormous sums. What nobody knew, what I'd kept secret for 38 years, was that not all of Marcus's paintings had burned in that fire. 3 months before he died, when he was in one of his sober periods, he'd asked if he could store some of his work in my workshop. He was worried about his girlfriend at the time, said she'd been stealing from him, selling his paintings without his permission to feed her own drug habit. He wanted the work somewhere safe. I'd said yes, of course. He was family. I'd built this hidden room for him, helped him move 42 paintings in the dead of night. We'd told no one, not even Catherine at first, because Marcus was paranoid and made me promise. Then came the fire. Marcus died, and his girlfriend died with him. In my grief, I almost forgot about the paintings. By the time I remembered, weeks had passed, and I realized something. If these paintings were assumed destroyed in the fire, then years later, when Marcus became famous, they'd be worth exponentially more than they would be otherwise. They'd be lost works. I'd wrestled with the morality of it for years, told Catherine finally, after the first anniversary of Marcus's death. She'd been shocked at first, then practical. "He gave them to you," she'd said. "He wanted them safe, and now they are safe. What you do with that is up to you." I'd done nothing, just let them sit there, year after year, as Marcus Brennan's reputation grew in the art world. As his surviving paintings sold for 6 figures, then 7 figures. These 42 paintings, lost to history, assumed destroyed, they were worth a fortune now, millions upon millions of dollars. But more than that, they were Uncle Marcus's legacy. His soul was in these paintings, and I'd be damned if I let Miranda and Greg get their greedy hands on them. The next 2 weeks were tense. Greg called repeatedly, leaving threatening voicemails about the guardianship hearing. Miranda showed up twice more, each time more aggressive about forcing us to sell. Then came the day that changed everything. It was early afternoon. Catherine was napping upstairs, and I was in the kitchen when I heard the car. But this time, they didn't knock. They used a key. Miranda still had one from years ago that I'd forgotten to ask for back. They walked straight toward me, and something in their expressions frightened me. "Dad, we need you to come to the workshop with us," Miranda said. "Why?" "We need to show you something. We need to talk. Out there, private, where we won't disturb Mom." Something felt wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on what. Still, I followed them out to the workshop. The moment we were inside, Greg shut the door behind us and I heard the deadbolt slide into place. Then I heard something even worse. He was doing something to the outside of the door. "What are you doing?" I demanded, trying the handle. It was locked from outside. "We're securing the situation," Greg said through the door. His voice was muffled but clear. "You need time to think, Thomas. Time to really consider what's best. You can't lock me in here." "We already did," Miranda's voice came through. "Dad, we checked the weather. It's supposed to drop to -15 tonight. This building isn't heated. You have maybe 12 hours before hypothermia becomes a serious risk. Or you can call us. Agree to sign over power of attorney, and we'll let you out." "Miranda, this is insane. This is criminal. This is necessary," she said, and I heard the coldness in her voice that made my heart break. "Mom's asleep. We've already called the home care service and canceled today's visit, told them Mom has a cold, and we're handling everything. Nobody's coming. Nobody knows you're out here. You can be stubborn and freeze, or you can be smart and cooperate. What about your mother? We'll check on her every few hours. She'll be fine. This is just for a day, Dad, just until you see reason." I heard their footsteps walking away, back toward the house. For a moment, I just stood there in shock. My own daughter, my own child had just locked me in my workshop to freeze until I gave up my rights, my property, my life. Then I started to laugh. It started as a chuckle, then grew into genuine laughter, because Miranda and Greg had made a critical mistake. They thought they knew this workshop. They thought they knew what they were dealing with, but they had no idea. I walked to my workbench and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was a satellite phone I'd kept charged for years, a remnant from my days doing engineering work in remote locations. Cell service was spotty out here, but satellite worked anywhere. I'd kept it maintained, just in case of emergencies. This qualified. But I didn't call the police. Not yet. Because calling the police would end this situation without revealing the true extent of what Miranda and Greg were willing to do. They'd make excuses, claim they'd locked the door by accident, play the concerned children card. I needed more. I needed them to fully expose themselves. Instead, I made a different call. "Malcolm? It's Thomas Brennan. Remember when you said if I ever needed anything? Well, I need something now." Malcolm Prescott had been my best friend for 45 years. We'd met in university, both studying engineering, and had stayed close even though he'd gone into law instead. He was now a senior partner at one of Toronto's most prestigious firms, specializing in estate law and elder abuse cases. I explained the situation quickly. Malcolm's response was immediate. "Stay put. Don't call them. Don't let them know you have any way out. Let them think they have you trapped. I'm getting in my car right now. I'll be there in 2 hours. And Thomas? I'm bringing a police officer with me. Someone I know who specializes in elder abuse cases. Malcolm, there's something else. Something you need to know." And I told him about the paintings. The silence on the other end lasted for what felt like a full minute. Then, "Jesus Christ, Thomas. Marcus Brennan's lost works? Do you have any idea? I know exactly what they're worth. That's why I never told anyone. That's why they have to stay secret until I know what I'm dealing with. This changes everything. Thomas, if they knew about those paintings, they don't, but they want this property, and they're willing to commit felony kidnapping to get it. I need to know how far they'll go." After I hung up with Malcolm, I did a quick check of the workshop. Greg had padlocked the door from outside and had done something to jam the windows. I could probably break through, but that would alert them. Better to wait. Better to let them think they'd won. The workshop had a small space heater I kept for winter projects, so I wasn't in immediate danger of freezing. I turned it on low, just enough to stay comfortable. Then I settled in to wait. About 4 hours later, my phone rang. Miranda's number. "Dad, have you thought about things?" I let my voice sound weak, defeated. "Miranda, please. Let me out. I need to check on your mother. I need my medications. First, let's talk about the power of attorney. This is elder abuse. This is illegal. This is love, Dad. Tough love. We're protecting you from yourself." I could hear Greg in the background, coaching her. "Just sign the papers. We can do it all electronically now. I'll email them to you, you sign, send back, and we'll have you out in an hour. Let me think about it, please. Just let me think. You have until tonight, 8 o'clock. Then we're going to bed, and you'll be out there all night. Your choice." She hung up. I checked my watch. Malcolm should be close now. At 7:30, just as the winter sun was setting and the temperature was really starting to drop, I heard vehicles pulling up. Multiple vehicles. Through the high window, I saw Malcolm's BMW, followed by a police cruiser. Followed by, and this made me smile, a van from Elder Services Canada, the national organization that advocates for senior citizens' rights. I heard raised voices from the house. Miranda and Greg, surprised and angry. Then I heard Malcolm's voice, carrying clear and cold in the winter air. "Where is Mr. Brennan? Right now." More arguing. Then footsteps approaching the workshop. I heard someone working on the padlock, and then the door swung open. Malcolm stood there, flanked by 2 police officers. Behind them, I could see Miranda and Greg, their faces white with shock and fear. "Thomas, are you all right?" Malcolm asked. "I'm fine," I said, stepping out into the cold evening air. A bit chilly, but fine. One of the officers, a woman with sergeant's stripes, stepped forward. "Mr. Brennan, I'm Sergeant Patricia Chen. Your daughter and son-in-law have admitted to locking you in this building. They claim it was an accident, that the door locked behind them, and they didn't realize you were inside." I turned to look at Miranda. "Is that what you told them?" She couldn't meet my eyes. "Dad, we were just trying to help." I pulled out my phone and hit play on the recording I'd made of our earlier call. Miranda's voice came through clearly. "You have until tonight. 8 o'clock. Then we're going to bed, and you'll be out there all night." Greg's face went from white to red. "You recorded that's illegal." "Actually," Malcolm said with a thin smile, "in Ontario, only one party to a conversation needs to consent to recording." Thomas consented to his own recording. Perfectly legal. And it clearly demonstrates false imprisonment, which is a federal offense in Canada, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. "We're family," Miranda said, and now there were tears in her eyes. "We were just the guardianship. We need to." "The guardianship petition is withdrawn as of this moment," Malcolm said. "In fact, I've already filed a counter-petition this afternoon, requesting restraining orders against both of you. You won't be allowed within 100 meters of Thomas or Catherine Brennan or their property." "You can't do that," Greg sputtered. "We're their daughter and son-in-law. You locked a 67-year-old man in an unheated building in winter and told him he'd stay there all night unless he signed over his rights." Sergeant Chen said quietly. "Yes, we absolutely can do that. In fact, you're both under arrest for false imprisonment and attempted theft by extortion." As the officers moved forward with handcuffs, Miranda finally broke down. "Dad, please. We just needed the house's worth." "I know what you needed," I said softly. "You needed money more than you needed a father. You needed property more than you needed a mother. You made your choice, Miranda. Now you live with it." As they led Miranda and Greg to the police car, the third person finally approached. She introduced herself as Linda Martinez from Elder Services Canada. "Mr. Brennan, I need to ask, are you and your wife safe? Do you have adequate care?" "We do," I assured her. "I'm Catherine's full-time caregiver, and we have professional help 3 times a week. I'd like to arrange for a full assessment, if you're comfortable with that. No pressure, no judgment, just to make sure all your needs are being met, and to provide information about available resources." I nodded. "I'd appreciate that. Thank you." Malcolm walked me back to the house. "Thomas, we need to talk about those paintings." "I know. The art world thinks they were destroyed. If they suddenly surface, I've been thinking about that for 38 years, Malcolm. Let me make some coffee, and we'll discuss it." Inside, Catherine was awake, clearly distressed by all the commotion. I sat beside her, took her hand, and explained everything that had happened. She couldn't speak, but she squeezed my hand, and I saw relief in her eyes. Over coffee, Malcolm and I discussed the paintings while Linda Martinez took notes. The situation was complex. The paintings weren't stolen. Marcus had given them to me, but their existence had been publicly misreported. From a legal standpoint, I had every right to them, but ethically, revealing them would disrupt the art market and potentially devalue Marcus's other works. "Here's my suggestion," Malcolm said after an hour of discussion. "We work with the Marcus Brennan Foundation, yes, there is one now, dedicated to preserving his legacy, and we reveal the painting's existence through them. You donate, say, half of them to the foundation. They go to museums, get displayed properly, celebrated as they should be. The other half, you keep and sell gradually through proper channels over the next decade. The foundation gets incredible works for public viewing, you get financial security, and the market doesn't crash from everything hitting at once." "What about Miranda and Greg?" I asked. "When they find out what those paintings are worth?" "That's the beautiful part," Malcolm said with a grim smile. "Because they attempted to coerce you through false imprisonment, and because we can prove they were after your estate, they've legally disqualified themselves from any inheritance claim. Canadian law is very clear on this. You cannot benefit from a crime. Even if you wanted to leave them something, which I strongly advise against, any inheritance they received could be challenged in court." Linda spoke up. "Mr. Brennan, I also want you to know that we'll be helping you establish a protective trust for you and your wife. Even if the guardianship had gone through, the court would have appointed an independent guardian, not Miranda and Greg. What they did today was not just criminal, it was pointless. They were never going to get control of your estate." I thought about that for a moment. "They didn't know that?" "Most people don't understand estate law," Malcolm said. "They watch TV shows and think children automatically get power of attorney over aging parents. That's not how it works, especially not when the parent is competent and actively fighting it. The courts don't just hand over control because someone filed a petition." The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Miranda and Greg were formally charged with false imprisonment. They pleaded guilty in exchange for reduced sentences, 2 years probation, mandatory community service, and permanent restraining orders. The guardianship petition was officially dismissed, and Malcolm began the complex process of revealing the painting's existence to the art world. The news hit like a bomb. "Lost works of Marcus Brennan found. After 38 years," read the headline in the Globe and Mail. The art world went into a frenzy. Experts flew in from around the world to authenticate them. Every single one was real, and together they represented some of Marcus's finest work pieces he'd created in the 3 years before his death, when his style had fully matured. The Marcus Brennan Foundation was ecstatic. 21 paintings went to them, with the agreement that they'd be displayed in rotating exhibitions across Canada and eventually in a permanent wing at the Art Gallery of Ontario. The other 21 paintings, Malcolm and I worked with Sotheby's to establish a slow-release schedule, 2 or 3 per year over the next decade. The first painting sold for $2.8 million, the second for $3.1 million. Catherine and I would never have to worry about money again. We could afford the best care, the best therapists, anything she needed. I hired a full-time nurse to help with her care, giving me the freedom to just be her husband again, not just her caregiver. We started to find moments of joy again, reading together, watching movies, sitting in the garden when the weather was nice. I established a foundation in Catherine's name, dedicated to stroke recovery research and support for caregivers. We endowed scholarships at our local university for engineering students. We made sure the money would do good in the world, would help people, would mean something. Miranda sent letters from time to time, apologies that felt hollow, explanations that felt like excuses. Greg sent nothing. They divorced within a year. I heard through mutual friends that he'd been the driving force behind the whole scheme, that he'd manipulated Miranda, played on her fears about her parents' aging and the property's value. Maybe that was true. Maybe it wasn't. Either way, Miranda had made her choices. She'd chosen to lock her father in a freezing workshop. She'd chosen property over people. And while I hoped she'd learned something from the experience, I couldn't have her in my life anymore. The trust was broken beyond repair. Catherine passed away peacefully 2 years later, surrounded by love and comfort, in our home, in the house we'd built together. She never had to leave. She never had to go to some institutional facility. She died with dignity, in the place where she'd lived her life. At her funeral, Miranda showed up. We didn't speak, but I saw her crying in the back. I felt sympathy for her, then sympathy for what she'd lost, what she'd thrown away. But I didn't approach her. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt. Now I'm 69 years old. I live alone in the house Catherine and I shared for 4 decades. The workshop is still there, though the hidden room is empty now. Sometimes I go out there and just sit, thinking about Uncle Marcus, about his tortured artistic genius, thinking about how his paintings saved me and Catherine when we needed it most, thinking about how secrets can be both burdens and blessings. The Marcus Brennan retrospective opens next month at the AGO. I'll be there for the opening, sitting in my wheelchair. The years have caught up with me, and my knees aren't what they used to be. I'll look at Uncle Marcus's work, displayed properly, appreciated by thousands of people who will be moved by his vision and his talent. And I'll know that I kept his legacy safe. I protected it, not from fire or theft, but from greed and short-sightedness. People ask me sometimes how I knew to keep those paintings secret for so long, how I knew they'd become valuable enough to save my life 3 decades later. The truth is, I didn't. I kept them secret because Marcus asked me to, because he trusted me. I kept them secret because revealing them felt wrong somehow, like betraying that trust. The value, financial and otherwise, that was just fortune, or maybe it was fate. But the real lesson I learned from all of this, the thing I want people to understand, is this. Your children are not entitled to your possessions. Your family is not entitled to your life. You owe them love, yes, if they've earned it. You owe them respect, if they've given it in return. But you do not owe them your home, your savings, your final years lived on their terms, instead of your own. When someone tells you they're acting for your own good while taking away your choices, they're not acting out of love, they're acting out of control. When someone locks you in a room until you give them what they want, that's not care, it's abuse. And it doesn't matter if they share your blood or your name. Abuse is abuse. Stand up for yourself. Get help if you need it. Document everything. Have your legal affairs in order with people you trust, not just people related to you. And if you have a secret, a backup plan, something your would-be controllers don't know about, keep it that way until you need it. Because sometimes, that secret is the only thing standing between you and losing everything you've spent your life building. I protected Uncle Marcus's paintings for 38 years without knowing why. In the end, those paintings protected me right back. That's not just luck. That's the universe rewarding loyalty, rewarding trust, rewarding the choice to keep faith with someone even when they're gone. Miranda made her choice. She chose money over her mother's comfort and her father's dignity. That choice cost her everything, her relationship with me, her inheritance, her marriage, and most importantly, her self-respect. I hope she's learned from it. I hope she's become a better person. But that's her journey now, not mine. Mine is to live the rest of my days in the home I built with the woman I loved, surrounded by the beauty her memory brings me, supported by the unexpected gift my uncle left behind. To live with dignity, with autonomy, with choice. That's what those paintings bought me. Not just money, but freedom. And that, more than any amount in a bank account, is what real wealth looks like. The story people tell now, in the art world and beyond, is about the lost paintings of Marcus Brennan, miraculously preserved and finally revealed. But the real story is about something simpler, about keeping faith, about standing firm, about refusing to let greed, even family greed, take from you what you've earned the right to keep. If you're reading this because you're worried about your own aging parents, here's my advice. Love them while they're here. Respect their choices. Support their autonomy. And if you catch yourself calculating their worth instead of cherishing their presence, take a long, hard look at yourself. Because when they're gone, you won't remember the house or the money. You'll remember whether you treated them with dignity. And that memory, good or bad, will stay with you the rest of your life. And if you're reading this because you're a senior citizen worried about your own children or family members pressuring you, controlling you, or trying to take what's yours, fight back. Get help. Call elder services. Call a lawyer. Call the police if you need to. You have rights. You have dignity. You have power, even when people try to convince you that you don't. Don't let anyone lock you in a room, literal or metaphorical, and tell you it's for your own good. Sometimes the walls we build around our treasures, whether they're paintings or principles, are the very things that save us when everything else falls apart. Build your walls, keep your secrets, trust carefully, and never, ever let anyone make you feel guilty for refusing to give up what's rightfully yours. That's the legacy I hope to leave behind. Not the paintings, those will outlive us all, but the reminder that dignity matters, that autonomy matters, that you have the right to live your life on your terms until the very end, no matter who disagrees, no matter who demands otherwise. That's worth more than any amount of money, and it's worth fighting for.